I got my pumpkin chai in hand, fall decorations in the back, and it's just starting to feel like fall, which is one of my favorite seasons. And today I have a new fall card making release with Ranger that I'm super excited to share with all of you. This release has designs that are great for fall, but also designs you can use all year long, so that when you buy them, they're incredibly versatile and you're not just stuck with using them for one season. Now, some of the artwork in this release is licensed, which means we pay really talented designers to create the artwork, and we sort of formulate it into stencils, background stamps, and stamp sets that work really well for card making. Now, the reason I do this is because I love many different styles, and so this allows me to get a wide array of styles because I usually wouldn't be able to draw these just by myself. There is some really beautiful artwork in this release. And by the way, everything is available right now, so I'll leave links down below so you can check it out and go shopping, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's take a look at this new release. The first item in this new release is a new Lunar Paste, and this color is called Refined Copper. And let me just tell you, it is absolutely gorgeous. It really finishes off and rounds out the metallic range of colors that we have and adds a whole new color. Now, if you haven't used Lunar Paste before, one of my favorite parts about it is just how creamy it is, so it's really easily able to spread on your project. However, it's still nice and thick so that it holds all the texture that you give it. So you can see all that amazing texture in that paste. One other thing that I really love about Lunar Paste is it's got that kind of thinner consistency to it, so you're able to swipe it on with your finger too, and kind of buff it into the cardstock to get that really beautiful metallic effect. Check that out, and the shine becomes even more intense once it's all dried. So once it's all dry, here is what Refined Copper looks like on both white and black cardstock. You can see that super intense metallic shine once you tilt it in the light. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you can also see all that amazing texture that it holds onto when you apply it thicker. The color and shine in Lunar Paste is all created using a pearl powder. So what makes this really special is that the shine actually reflects the color instead of just being a white tint when you tilt it in the light. This also means that it's super intense on black cardstock. So you can see it really takes over and it's super opaque. Even when you apply it thin with your finger, it still really stands out and shines against the black cardstock, which is just gorgeous. And like I said, Refined Copper really helps to finish off some of the metallics in the Lunar Paste line as well. We have the Refined Copper, Gold Rush, and Silver Lining. And once these metallics are dry, here is how they look against that black cardstock. They're absolutely gorgeous and give such a beautiful metallic shine. I love them, and like I said, they're super elegant. So if you're not into some of the super bright colors we have in the Lunar Paste line, these are a little bit more muted, just being really basic and great metallics, and they're amazing to have in your collection. The 6x6 stencil in this release is absolutely amazing. It's called Flip Flop Circles, and it's one of my favorites. It's similar to a design we've come out in the past, called Flip Flop Chevrons. And the idea with this is that you have half of the chevron design. So you stencil it once and then you flip the stencil and you complete the rest of the design with a second layer. It turns out really beautiful once you've done both layers. So the idea with the Flip Flop Circle stencil is the exact same. You're gonna stencil one half of the circles, flip it, and complete the design, and you get a beautiful two-toned effect. All right, so let's do some stenciling. I'm gonna be using the stamp wheel, so I'll remove the lid so we can get our sticky mat. I'm going to place in a piece of my Simon Hurley stark white cardstock and then place it down. Then when you're using one of the Simon Hurley Create stencils, you want to make sure that you use the glossy side. There's a more matte side and there's a glossy side. The matte side has a coating on it, and these sticky mats tend to peel up that coating. So you're going to face the glossy side down towards the mat, line it up, and then place it down and press it down into the sticky mat to make sure that it's held in place. I love this because you don't need any tape to hold it down. We're gonna go in with kind of a Halloween color combo, so I'm starting off with a little bit of Crown Me, which is this nice royal purple color, and I'm gonna use these large Altenew blending brushes to blend this in because it makes it really easy to cover a large surface area like the stencil very quickly. And this has got to be one of my favorite colors. It's so vibrant and regal, and it's just beautiful for Halloween cards especially. So then I'm going to go in and lift this off. You can see that beautiful crisp blended line. So this is how we stenciled it. Now we're going to lift off the stencil, rotate it, and then we can place it down on our surface and line it up to complete those circles. Once you've got it all lined up to fill in those circles, we're going to place it down and again stick it down into the mat so that it doesn't move. For this layer, I'm going to use Guppy, which is this nice light and bright orange color. I'm gonna go in using a large blending brush, again from Altenew. I have one for each color family, so I don't have to clean them off in between, which makes it really nice and easy. And then I'm going to go on the surface and start blending this right down. Now another reason that I'm using blending brushes to blend out a design like this is because when you're stenciling and there's sharp edges, like on the edges of these circles, I find that blending brushes do a better job because all those little bristles get down into those details and get a really nice crisp image. All right, so once we're done blending that out, you can then go in and again lift this off the surface, and you can see a really beautiful completed design with those two-toned circles. It looks so gorgeous, and of course this is very Halloween because of the purple and orange, but of course just switching up the color scheme can make the stencil so versatile all year long on lots of different card designs. And then to clean it, I just spray it down with a little bit of water. And one of the best parts about Simon Hurley Create inks is they clean off without staining. So I'm just gonna wipe this down with a paper towel, and it cleans off perfectly from the stamp wheel mat. Now, of course, that design is beautiful, but there's no limit or rules on how you have to shift your stencil, and you can do it several different ways to get unique effects. So I stenciled another layer of the purple, and then we can flip and rotate our stencil again. But instead of lining it up just like circles, I'm going to also shift it up a little bit and in between the other circles to create a different design that's very unique. Once we got it lined up, we can place it down and press it into our stamp wheel mat. I'm going to use a little bit of mint tape to mask off the bottom half to make sure we don't get any of the paste where we don't want it on the background. I've been loving this new mint tape dispenser as kind of a one-handed way to get access to mint tape. You guys know this is my favorite masking tape, and this has been a game changer. So to do this layer, I'm going to use a little bit of Lunar Paste in this new refined copper color. I think this warm orangey metallic is going to complement the purple really beautifully. So I'll take it out with my palette knife from the paste tool set, and I'm just going to spread a nice thick layer at the top of my stencil design. You can apply as much paste as you need because any of the excess will be put back into the jar once we're done. Then I'll go in with the scraper tool, also from my paste tool set, and I'm just going to start at the top where this paste starts and drag it all the way down on my card project. And just do it a couple times to make sure that whole background is nicely covered with paste. Once we got a nice even application all the way down the background, we can then tilt our tool at more of an upright angle like this, and this is going to help collect the paste off the surface, get rid of any of the excess, and smooth it out nicely. Then like I said, any of the excess that's on the scraper tool can be scraped off with my palette knife and placed right back into the jar to use for next time. Then we can go in and lift off the stencil. And you can see the Lunar Paste did a great job through the stencil and didn't seep underneath, so you got a really nice crisp image. Now when it comes to Lunar Paste, you want to clean it off pretty quickly once you're done working with it. So I'm just going to spray down some water and then I'll clean it off with a paper towel. And while Lunar Paste is still wet, that water is going to help break down the paste and clean it off the surface. But it's permanent once it's dry, so make sure you clean it while it's still wet. And here's how the background looks with the refined copper Lunar Paste once it's all dry. That shine is so gorgeous, and I love that offset circle pattern. It sort of looks like streamers to me, and this could be great for birthday cards if you did it in really nice and bright colors. I love all the options you have with the stencil and different ways to shift it, and I can't wait to see how you guys create with it. Next we have the Fall Sampler stamp set, and this really has a mix of everything, hence the name Fall Sampler. So you've got a great mix of fall and Thanksgiving images, as well as anyone who likes Halloween or something a little bit more spooky up top here. Now what's super cool about all these images is they're really great for stamping because they're nice and bold. So with all of these bold images, it has different floral styles all throughout the images that are cut out of each one. Then you also have the positive version of each one of those designs, so you can really easily stamp them inside the image in a different color to color it all in. So you have these two adorable little bats up top, and again, the different floral images that color in both of their wings really easily. You've got this adorable little smiley ghost, and again, his little floral image to color it in is right up there. And then a wide array of different shapes and sizes of these pumpkin images with all different types of florals all throughout. And again, all of them have different floral images that you're easily able to stamp inside and color it all in. I'm going to bring in an A2 size card front just so I can show you guys just how large these images are. I love that we designed these pumpkins and images to be a little bit larger, so you only need a few to fill out a card perfectly and create a nice beautiful scene. And also lots of these sentiments are interchangeable, so you can do I'm beyond, grateful, or thankful, and then for all you do, you can also do so grateful or thankful, and you can do like thankful for you. So lots of different options just with those couple sentiments. Then you have you're such a blessing in my life, happy Thanksgiving, or happy Halloween, here for the booze, which is just so much fun with that little ghost, You're Fantastic for the different bats up here, and then Hey Pumpkin for all the great pumpkins we have. So something to go along with all the images and to cover all the holidays. I love just how versatile this set is with all the different types of images we were able to fit in it. And then Spellbinders created a fall sampler die set that you can really easily use to cut out all the different images that are in this set. So it has a die for all of the solid images that are in the set. Now there was extra space inside these pumpkin images, and instead of leaving these blank, we wanted to make the die set even more versatile for you. So while these faces don't necessarily coordinate with the stamp set that we have, the faces can be placed inside the pumpkins while you're die cutting, and they cut out the faces right out of the pumpkin, which is so much fun. So talk about bang for your buck. This gives you tons of extra versatility, so you can use the pumpkins on their own with these different scary faces and create a whole different type of Halloween card. Then to finish off this fun and playful Halloween card, I'm gonna go in using the adorable ghost and the sentiment that says "Here for the booze." To stamp this down, I'm gonna use a little bit of Woof, which is this lighter gray color. I'm gonna ink that up all around. And then to give this some more shading and depth, I'm gonna go in with this darker gray color called Shady and just kind of roll on the edge of the ink pad to the bottom of the stamp to give it a darker color. Once that's all inked up, we can stamp it down onto our stark white cardstock, give it some good pressure, and there we have our perfectly stamped ghost. I love how adorable that turns out with the two-tone gray colors and those little florals on the bottom really give it a fun and playful detail. And then we'll quickly and easily stamp down the "Here for the booze" sentiment. To cut out the ghost, I'm going into the fall sampler die set and pulling out the ghost die. Then we'll line the die up with a nice even white border all the way around the image and use a bit of mint tape to hold it down into place while we run it through our die cutting machine. Then we can pop that out, and it's perfectly cut out with a nice even white border. There's no die for the sentiment, but I'm just gonna quickly and easily fussy cut this out, leaving a little bit of a white border all the way around the sentiment. This doesn't take much extra time at all, and it helps give it a nice finished effect rather than just leaving it on a rectangle of cardstock. Then to finish off this card, I'll pop up the ghost on some foam tape front and center, and that finishes it off perfectly. I love this fun and playful Halloween card, that circle background with the classic orange and purple colors, and that adorable ghost front and center really finishes it off nicely and ties it all together. That ghost just puts such a smile on my face, and I can't wait to send this card out. Next we have this bold and beautiful 6x6 peel apart rubber background stamp called Wings and Things. The design has a bunch of different leaves, acorns, flowers, butterflies, and dragonflies all throughout, and they're in this really bold and graphic look, which means you're able to just stamp this background stamp and not have to do any coloring with it. But even though they are quite bold, they still have lots of little dots and details that make this stamp really special and gives it that kind of hand-drawn look, which I just love. Now, similar to other peel apart background stamps in my line, some of the images in this stamp come out. So you can just use it as a background as is, or you can peel out some of the images and stamp them separately. So when you first get the stamp, you're gonna notice that these are attached with little tiny pieces of rubber. That's totally okay and normal. You're going to kind of really easily peel and rip those out, and it's gonna come out perfectly. Those little attachments are just for the manufacturing process to make it easy, but they're meant to be peeled apart so you can use and stamp these individually. So here's a look at everything you get from the background stamp. You get 2 dragonflies flying in different directions, another dragonfly that's at a different position, and 3 different beautiful butterflies to use as well. I love that you have the option to stamp these separately or to put it back in and use it as a full background stamp. Now to put this back in, it's pretty easy. It goes in just like a puzzle would, where you kind of place it into place like that. Now if it's not going perfectly down like that, all you need to do is tilt the rubber a little bit and press it into place, and it should fall right back into the background stamp super easily. And once all those pieces are back in, you're ready to stamp the background stamp fully and get this beautiful design. If you watch my videos a lot, you probably know by now that to add texture to backgrounds, I love to use background stamps for tone-on-tone stamping. So today I'm going to use the Wings and Things background stamp and use a little bit of Gur ink on top of a piece of craft cardstock to get a beautiful fall background. So I'll just go in here and ink up my background stamp all over. So I kind of swipe on my ink a little bit, and then to even it out, I just go in and tap all over. And then to stamp it down, I take my cardstock, place it right into the design, and then I use a pressure tool to just press all over the back. You could just use your hands to press too, but this just gives me a nice even pressure and stamped image. And then when we lift it off, check out that gorgeous background design that we have. I absolutely love how this background design stamps out, and it gives such a beautiful fall look on this craft cardstock. All right, now I'm gonna stamp out some of these pumpkins. So I'm gonna start off by doing a little bit of stamp shading. I'm starting off with a mid-tone orange called Roar, and then I'm gonna use a little bit of Game Over, which is this darker maroon color, and take the edge of the ink pad and sort of start rolling it onto the stamp to get a little bit of shading and depth at the bottom of the image. And you can also go in using a little bit of brown. Here I'm using Weeping Willow right at the top of the pumpkin. All right, then we can stamp this down, giving it some good pressure. There we go. I love that beautiful shaded effect that you get on the image when you roll your ink pads on like that. Now these are new stamps that I haven't used before, so to prime the image, if you're not getting a great solid impression, you can go in and just use your finger and swipe it all over the photopolymer stamp. The oils from the finger help kind of condition the stamp. You'll see it turn a little bit cloudier, and then it'll accept ink a little bit better, which is super helpful with solid images like this. For this next one, I'm going to use lighter colors, so I'm going in using Guppy, which is this lighter orange color, to ink up the whole stamp. And then for some shading, I'll go in using Roar, and I'm just going to roll this using the edge of the ink pad up from the bottom of the stamp, and it gives it this beautiful blended effect. And again, I'll add a little bit of brown, and we'll go in and stamp this out, giving it some good pressure. There we go. And you can really see the difference here. This one's a lot more solid than this one. The ink bubbled up a little bit here. That's completely normal when the stamp set is new. So if you want to kind of condition it and get it ready to take the ink, just rub your finger on it and it'll be perfect to go. All right, lastly with this stamp again, I'm gonna rub my finger on it until it turns a little bit cloudy, and then it's ready to take the ink. And for this one, I'm gonna go in using a little bit of Slippery and Wet, which is this kind of yellowy mustard color. And for some shading on this one, I'm going to use a little bit of Later Gator, which is this nice mid-tone green, and I'm just going to take it and roll it all over the edge of this pumpkin. And then again, I'll go in using a little bit of Weeping Willow up top to give it a nice brown stem. And check out that beautiful stamped impression that you get. This is why I love that the images in the set are solid, because inking it up gives really beautiful color, and it's super quick to get this sort of result. Then I'll go back into the fall sampler set and pull out the different pumpkins that we want to use to cut these out. And then again, we'll line them up on the pumpkins and use a little bit of mint tape to make sure they're held in place perfectly while we do our die cutting so that nothing shifts. And then we'll run this through our die cutting machine to cut it all out. And once you run it through, these pop out perfectly with a nice white border all around the images. For the sentiment, I've put together the Happy Thanksgiving, and this is the perfect sentiment for the card with all of these pumpkins on it. So I'll stamp it down onto my stark white cardstock, and then again, I'll go in with some clear heat embossing powder to throw it over top and heat set this so that it's nice and shiny. Now there's no die in the set to cut out sentiments, but I like to go in with my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors and just fussy cut right around the edge. It's pretty easy to do, but I find that it gives it a really finished look rather than just leaving this on a rectangle of cardstock. These scissors really help because they spring back out at you so your hands don't get tired, and I find that because they do all that work for you, it gives you a little bit of a smoother line as you're maneuvering around the sentiment. So I'll definitely link down below to these as well. They've been my go-to scissors for fussy cutting. Alright, so to adhere the card together, I'm going to put the larger and taller pumpkins near the back. So I'm going to adhere these flat down onto the card using a little bit of tape runner. And then to give the card a little bit of dimension, I'm going to pop up this front pumpkin on a little bit of foam tape to make it stand out and add a little bit of depth. And there is that finished card. I absolutely love how this turned out with the Wings and Things background stamp to give it a beautiful fall background, and then stamping those pumpkins from the fall sampler in a bunch of different colors to give it depth, dimension, and shading was so much fun. Those intricate floral designs on the pumpkins are so unique and playful to anything I've seen before, and I just love the design that it gives them. Next we have another 6x6 rubber stamp set called Floral Borders. This one's a little bit different style for me, but I absolutely love it, and I think I'm going to get tons of use out of it in my craft room. There's 4 different large floral borders in the set, and they've all got quite a different style to them, so you can use them on a variety of cards. This top border's kind of got a vintage and elegant look to it. I love those sort of hand-drawn looking leaves, along with these dainty little flowers that you're easily able to color in if you would like to. The second one has a little bit more of a bold and graphic look to it. I love this sort of leaf looking design, and I think this would be great for more of a tropical card, maybe stamping it all down the card to create a repeated background all throughout. This third one has a similar style to the one on top. I love the kind of hand-drawn scroll looking design here and the dainty flowers all throughout. This would be a really great design to color or just stamp that fine line detail image and maybe do a little bit of embossing. And last but not least, we have another super bold design. This one has a bunch of sunflowers throughout and there's tons of details in those florals and then some really great leaves. This would be fun to stamp one or a couple stripes and then color the different sunflowers and leaves in to finish off your design. The detail on all of these is absolutely gorgeous and I can see using these just as borders on a card, or I could see stamping them repeatedly down a card to create a really beautiful and elegant background. Now when you're using a rubber stamp set like this, you're going to need to peel it off of the backer sheet here, and then I recommend having an acrylic block or something large enough to pick it up and stamp it with. So I'm going to go in with my large Simon Hurley acrylic block. Again, I'll have this linked down below. So it's big enough to fit them, but not too big where you can't get a grip on it. It's really easy to hold onto, and it's got a great thickness too, so that it's not too thick that you're going to drop it on your project. We worked really hard on making this like the perfect acrylic block to stamp larger background strips like this. Okay, so to start out this card, I'm going to use the floral border stamps, and I like this one right here to give kind of a gothic effect against black cardstock. So I'll peel this off. Then I'll pick it up with my large Simon Hurley acrylic block so we can stamp it on our card. Now I want to show how to use the Lunar Paste to do our stamping against the dark colored cardstock. So here I'm going to use that new refined copper color, but you can use any color. I'm going to go in using my palette knife from the paste tool set, and then I'll go on the scraper from the paste tool set, and we're just going to use the scraper as sort of a palette for my color. I'm going to apply the color really thin. A really thin layer goes a super long way with this technique. And then I'm going to use a rubber brayer. This is a really great application method to get the paste onto the stamp and not get too much onto the stamp because you don't want it to be clumpy. So I'll just start by rolling my brayer gently through the paste, and you really want a little amount. So notice how I'm not running it through the whole thing. I'm just taking a little bit off to the side, making sure my brayer is fully coated, and then we'll go right onto the stamp and lightly brayer this on. Now you want to move pretty quickly once you've started brayering onto your stamp because this stuff dries quite quickly. So you want to load this up. Then I'll bring in a black A2 size card base, and I'm just going to stamp this vertically against my card base. Now you don't want to hold it there for too long. You want to lift it up pretty quickly. If you hold it for too long, it could start drying to the cardstock and rip it. So you want to stamp, lift up quickly, and then you get this really beautiful stamped effect. I love how this looks. It sort of glows when you tilt it in the light. It's that beautiful orange refined copper color, and it dries really quickly since we stamped it super thin. So here I stamped it vertically as a grounding place on the card, but you could also stamp it down the card like this several different times to create kind of a repeated background. I love how this card panel turned out too. Now right after stamping, you just want to make sure you clean your tools really well. So I'll wipe off my brayer and it comes clean with just water while it's still wet. And same thing for the stamp, I'll just spray it down with some water and clean it off with a rag or a microfiber cloth so that it comes really nice and clean before it dries. Now for a focal point, I'm going to use the Fall Sampler stamp set, and I'm going to use these adorable little bats. So I'll peel them out along with the secondary images to color them in. And to get a nice jet black image, I'm going to go in using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and this is going to stamp them nice and solid since it's a pigment type ink. And then we'll stamp them right down onto our stark white cardstock. Perfect. Since this ink takes a little bit longer to dry, to seal it in place, I'm going to use a little bit of clear heat embossing powder. Throw that over top, tap off the excess, and then I'll heat this until it's clear and shiny. I love a good black and purple color combination lately. I think it's so stunning. So I'm gonna go in using the floral images to color in the wings, and I'm gonna stamp them down using a little bit of Crown Me ink. So we'll just look over top of the images to line them up really easily and stamp them into place to color the wings in. And then stamp the bottom one in as well. Perfect. So I love that we included those images so that it's super easy to color the wings and images in using different colors of ink. Alright, so then I'm going into the Fall Sampler coordinating dies, and these line up perfectly with the bats. So I'll just grab a little bit of mint tape, and that's just going to help hold it in place while we run it through our die cutting machine to make sure nothing shifts. So just line up the dies with an even white border all the way around it, and then you can easily tape them right into place. We'll pop that right in our die cutting machine and run it through to cut them out. And check this out, it cuts them out super easily with a nice white border all the way around the images. Now for my sentiment, I'm going to do a little bit of heat embossing, so you're going to use your anti-static powder tool to make sure no powder sticks where we don't want it. And then I'll ink up my sentiment with a little bit of Versamark clear sticky ink. And this says, "You're Fang-tastic," which is perfect for these bats. And I'll stamp it right down onto black cardstock. Then I'll throw over a little bit of white heat embossing powder on top of my sentiment and tap off any of the excess. Then I'll heat set this till it's nice and bright white. Then I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive to the center of these bats, and I'm going to line them up kind of following this design line here as a nice grounding place. I'll add some adhesive to this one too, and just adhere it down, kind of flying towards the top of my card. And by not adhering down the sides of the wings, they can kind of float up and give it more of a 3D effect. Then I'll pop up the sentiment using a little bit of foam tape, again following that strip. And there we have our finished card. It was really simple to put this together, but I love how it turned out. I love how that floral border looks stamped in the new refined copper Lunar Paste. It gives it such a beautiful shine and contrast against the black. And then finishing it off with those bats stamped with purple is just so beautiful and such a fun way to finish off the card. So to use these little face inserts, I'm going to start off by just using the solid outlines and cutting these out of a lighter yellow piece of cardstock. So I'll run this right through our die cutting machine to cut them out. Alright, then I've chosen the faces that I want to use for the inside of the pumpkin. We'll place them face down on my desktop, and you just want to line them up inside the pumpkin exactly where you want it to cut out, and then take a piece of mint tape or low-tack tape to hold these together. So again, same thing for this one. You can choose any of the faces in the set, line them up really easily inside the pumpkin, and then once you've got it lined up, we'll just tape it in place to hold everything together. Now for this layer, I'm going to use this nice mid-tone orange colored cardstock and run them through the die cutting machine. So here's how they look once they're cut out of the pumpkin. They're so awesome. There's 4 faces in this set, so these are 2 of them. Now if you know me, you know I just can't help myself when it comes to adding a little bit of depth and dimension with inks. So I'm gonna go in on these dies and use a little bit of roar to just blend the top and the bottom of the pumpkins. And this makes them look a little bit more round and gives them some added depth. You can also go onto the stems and add a little bit of brown ink. So here I'm gonna go in using some Weeping Willow to color those in. Alright, so now you have both of these pieces and you could just adhere them flat together like this and it creates such an adorable looking pumpkin, right? How cool is that? But if you want to even step it up a notch from there, I'm going to go in using a little bit of foam tape and place it all around the back of the pumpkin, avoiding the eyes and mouth. So once we've added our foam tape, we can then bring back in the bottom layer of the pumpkin, line these up, and then add it right down on top. And the fun part about doing it that way is it gives it a little bit of a shadow on that yellow, and it gives it the more carved pumpkin effect by having that little bit of shadow against the face. I'll do the same thing for this one, adding some foam tape on the back of the pumpkin, all around the eyes and mouth, and then I'll line these up on top of each other, kind of pinch them together to align them, and adhere it down. So super cool when they're finished, and I've got to say, adding that little bit of dimension with the foam tape and the ink to add some dimension as well really brings these guys to life. To finish off this card, I'm going to do some tone-on-tone stamping using these leaves. This kind of reminds me of like a pumpkin stem that would kind of like twist and wind, so I think it's a super fun pattern. So I'll peel this right out, and again, we'll use it on the large Simon Hurley Create acrylic block. And I'm going to stamp on a dark brown card base, so I'm using this really dark brown ink called Weeping Willow, which I think is going to give a beautiful tone-on-tone effect once it's stamped. So I'll just ink this up. And then I can stamp it right down onto my card, giving it some good pressure to make sure that it transfers. And there we go, that looks beautiful. Now I'm gonna do some repeat stamping to create a little bit more of a background, kind of a grounding place for these pumpkins. So I'll just go back in and ink this up. This is how we had the stamp, and I like that you can go in and kind of flip it and rotate it. This helps interlock the design and also make it look like it wasn't just one pattern that you repeated all over the card, and it looks completely different than that bottom one. And now I could keep going all the way up the card, but I think I'm gonna stop there because it creates a really great grounding place for the pumpkin, and it makes it almost look like this is the ground and the sky gives it a nice interest on the bottom there. Now I'm gonna stamp my sentiment inside the Misty stamping tool to make sure I don't mess anything up at the end of the card. I'm gonna use a little anti-static powder tool because I'm doing some heat embossing on this background. I'm gonna use the sentiment that says Happy Halloween, and I can use the grid lines in my lid to make sure that it's perfectly aligned. So I think that looks pretty good. And then to stamp it, I'm going to use a little bit of Versamark clear sticky ink to ink it up and stamp it onto our brown card base. Then I'll throw over a little bit of white heat embossing powder and tap off any of the excess. And if any sticks where you don't want it to, just go in using a dry brush and swipe any of it away. Then I'll heat set this until it's nice and bright white. And that finishes it off beautifully. I love this dark brown background and that tone-on-tone stamping to make a beautiful grounding place using the floral borders. This leaf design goes along with the pumpkins just perfectly. And also, can we take a moment for that die set? I love that you can just use it individually with those faces and get so much use out of those pumpkins to create some more scary looking Halloween pumpkins. Next, we have a 6x6 rubber stamp set called Leaf Prints, and this one is just stunning. Now it's on a thicker piece of acetate, and you're meant to keep this and use it as a backer sheet and storage to help store the stamp set in your craft room. So in this set, you have 8 really bold and beautiful leaf designs. These are quite solid stamps, so that's why we did them in a red rubber stamp set, because solid images stamp absolutely beautifully using red rubber. But what's really special about this stamp set is all those tiny little dots and details actually stamp when you're using these stamps. So you get tons of texture in each one of these leaves, and that can really only be achieved using red rubber. So check out all of those little tiny divots that are taken out of the stamp. That gives them little imperfections and is gonna make them stamp absolutely beautifully with lots of texture. This is an A2 card, and I also wanted to show you how big these leaves are for scale against an A2 size card. It's all about scale for me, and I wanted these to be a beautiful stamped focal point, or for you to easily be able to create a background on your card using them, but I wanted them to be quite substantial. So they're going to really fill a card nicely. And lastly, I love that these are super organic and kind of imperfect. They're not cookie cutter leaves, which makes them look really realistic once they're all stamped. So you can see there's some that kind of overlap each other, there's some missing here, they've got some nice bend to them, and overall they're just really realistic with their jagged edges and all of the texture and details that are included in these stamps. They're going to be great for stamping techniques. And along with the Leaf Prints stamp set, you can purchase a Leaf Prints die set. So this has all of the leaves in the set that you can really easily cut out using these dies. And this is going to really come in handy because check out all of those little jagged details. Cutting out leaves can sometimes be a bit of a nightmare, so I love that we've included a die set to make it really easily to cut all these out. Check out even on some of these leaves that you think are straight, they got super jagged and detailed edges with these dies, so it's just going to give them a nice realistic look when you cut them out using the die set. When I get a die set like this, to store it, I actually use these Stamp and Storage 6x7 magnet cards, or you can get any of the magnet cards that come in lots of different sizes from Stamp and Storage. Clearly I need to get some bigger ones as well, but I like these because they're really nice and thick and sturdy. No dies fall off because they're not super bendable, and they're really easy to peel the dies off here, use them on your project, and then place them right back down. And I just store these in a little bin so I'm easily able to flip through all my die sets because they're on such nice sturdy magnet cards. So this is what I've been using. I'll link down below in case you're interested, but I wanted to share that because sometimes I get questions about my die storage. Alright, so let me show you how I plan on using these leaves. I'm probably going to use all of them for today's card, so I'll just peel them all off this backer sheet. Then let's go in and do our stamping. Now whenever I do stamping like this, you want to kind of start off with the lightest color that you're going to use first. So here I'm going to go in and kind of flood this whole leaf with some guppy ink. Then I'll go in with some darker colors, so here I'm using a little bit of Love Struck, and I think the fun part about these leaves is going to be the fact that they don't have to be clean or perfect at all. You can see some lines from my ink pad, and I'm totally okay with that, because the leaves kind of have that natural look to them. They're not perfect in nature, and I think that's what's so fun about these stamps. Now I'm going to go in here with a little bit of water and spray down the stamp. If you want to keep more of that texture that's in the stamp, don't spray it down with water and you'll get all of that amazing texture. But I want to see what it looks like with water because I think it's going to look like we watercolored these leaves, which is super fun and exciting. Okay, so I'll place this down on my cardstock, let it soak in for a couple seconds, and lift it off, and oh my gosh. The leaf blended together beautifully, and check out how gorgeous that looks. Now you can still see some of the little texture that's in that stamp. You can see what those divots were on the stamp as well, but when it watercolors, it kind of blends it together a lot more than it usually would and creates that gorgeous, solid watercolored leaf. I'm obsessed with these, so I'm gonna go in and do lots of different leaves like this, showing some different color combinations you could use. All right, next one, this leaf is gorgeous. I'm going in using a little bit of Psych, which is this really bright green color, just to lay down a base of color. Then here I'm gonna go in with several different types of greens. So I'm going in with Viper, which is this kind of more olivey green color, and just tapping it all throughout. Again, not worrying about blended perfection or anything like that. Then I'm going to go in with some Fake Plant, which is this darker green color, and I'm just going to tap this all throughout the image as well. It's speckled and spotted and imperfect, but that's the fun part about it. Then we'll go in and spray this down with a little bit of water, and we can stamp this right down onto our cardstock. And voila. That is just gorgeous. All right, for this next one, I'm going to use a mid-tone orange color called Traffic Cone. This one is really beautiful. Ink up the whole stamp. Then I'll go in using some Love Struck and kind of spot it all throughout to get some red going in this leaf. And then again, who said we can't use a little bit of brown? I'll kind of spot some of the edges with some brown throughout. Spray it down, and we'll stamp it right down onto our cardstock. Perfect. For this long skinny leaf, I'm going to use a little bit of Viper all throughout to give this nice dark olive color. And then we'll add some darker green with some fake plant throughout the stem. And voila, boop. Perfect. All right, then I waited till these are all dried off, and I didn't stamp every single one, but I stamped quite a few of them, and then I can go in with the coordinating die set and lift off all the dies that we're gonna use to easily be able to cut these guys out. So we'll just find the coordinating die, line it up perfectly with a nice white border around the edge, and then I'll bring in a little bit of mint tape to hold it in place. And like I said, I'm so thankful that these have dies because there's so many little jaggedy edges all around the images, so this cuts them out really perfectly. And once those are all lined up, we can quickly and easily run them through the die cutting machine to cut it all out. And once we run that through the die cutting machine, these pop out perfectly. And like I said, all of the little jagged edges and details are cut out just beautifully with the die cuts. Insane detail and such a huge time saver to have the dies in your collection. Now before we add the leaves down to our background, I want to add a little bit of depth to the card base. So I'm using this dark brown card base and I want to add a little bit of shading. So I'm going in using Weeping Willow, which is a little bit of a darker brown, and I'm just going to blend this on the edges, fading towards the center of the cardstock. Leaving the center of the cardstock lighter is going to draw your eye to it and make that the focal point of the card. And it's going to give it lots more depth, dimension, and a little bit of drama to the card by adding this darker color all around the edges. It creates such a rich and elegant look. And if you want to, you can even step this up a notch by adding a little bit of texture by spraying a little bit of water down all over your card. And this is because my inks react with water. So that ink that I just blended on is slowly going to start reacting to the water and give it a really cool texture and effect. So you can see that once all that is nice and dry, the ink lifts off some of the color from the surface of the cardstock and gives it this really beautiful splotchy effect that I just love. The extra texture adds so much detail and interest to the card. All right, then I'm going to take these pieces and go in using my glue press, squeeze a little bit of the Barely Art liquid glue onto the back of these die cuts, and then adhere them all around the card, kind of all pointing towards the center of the card where they're going to meet up. All right, hold that in place for a second. As I'm doing this, I'm going to cut the leaves off the edge too. That way we can keep using the pieces that we cut off along the background. All right, next I'm going to add this leaf, and I love this glue press. It makes squeezing the glue really easy, and then putting it down into that little carrier is really helpful to make sure your glue isn't drying out in between using it. All right, place this down, squeeze on a little bit of glue, and then adhere it into place. And so this part is kind of a slower and more tedious process, but trust me, it is going to be so worth it in the end once all these are adhered down. And then we can start using some of the pieces that we've cut off and adhere the stems facing towards the center of the card, so we're not wasting any of the pieces that we cut right off. And check it out once that background is all finished. The time that it took to make this was so worth it in the end. I love all the different watercolor looking stamped leaves, and using the dies to cut it out gives it that really great white border so you can add it onto a piece of dark cardstock and have it really stand out against the dark colored cardstock. To put this together, I'm doing a little bit of heat embossing on some brown cardstock. So I'm going to use the sentiment that says "Grateful for You" and ink this up using a little bit of Versamark clear sticky ink and stamp it down onto the cardstock. Then I'll throw over a layer of white heat embossing powder to make that sentiment really stand out. Tap off any of the excess and heat this till it's nice and bright white. Then I'll adhere this right down in the center of the card where all the leaves are pointing to. And that turned out so beautiful. All the watercolor stamped leaves are just gorgeous, and the fact that we took the extra time to compose them on the card, all facing the center like that, is so striking. And it provides such a great transition for your eyes to focus towards the center where all the leaves are pointing to the sentiment. This is the perfect Thanksgiving or thank you card for someone you're grateful for. So in the past, we've released the Spring Chicken stamp set as well as the Hot Diggity Dog stamp set. And these are so fun. I love the style of these images. They've got kind of a quirky and fun, playful look to them. And this artist does such an amazing job illustrating these designs. And because you guys loved them as well, we now have the perfect cats stamp set. You get tons of different types of cats, as well as lots of different positions that they're in, so you can make some really fun and playful dynamic cards using the cats. I know there's a lot of cat lovers out there, and there was tons of requests to do a cat stamp set, so here it is. So you've got a cat catching a mouse, one of those naked hairless cats, one that's kind of standing up, reaching for a toy, one that's laying down, one that's kind of on the prowl, and my friend has a cat that looks exactly like this. Then you got some that are kind of ready to play, chasing its tail, ready to spot something on the ground, again on its back. And then you got a little black cat, which I thought would be so fun for Halloween, and look at that little tiny smile on his face. Then of course, lots of yarn balls, feather toys, and different butterflies that they could be playing with, and then lots of great sentiments to finish it off. I hope you're in every one of my 9 lives. Love you, you're one cool cat. Hope your birthday is perfect. Have a nice day. You are perfect. Stay positive. Meow. You've got to be kidding me. You're how old? Meow you doing? And I need you. So lots of great sentiments in this set to be able to use on your greeting cards with the images. Now again, to coordinate with the stamp set, Spellbinders has created a die set called Perfect Cats, and this cuts out all of the cat images as well as all of the different little tiny images that they're playing with all throughout the set. They also have lots of little interior die cutting areas so that like in between its tail you could cut out really easily, and that's something that I wouldn't just be able to do with my scissors. So I'm super thankful to have a die set to make it tons easier to cut these images out. And again, when I have a die set like that, I put them on these storage sheets. I'm definitely going to need to get some bigger ones from Stampin' Storage to make them all fit, but I love the quality. All right, now let's create a fun scene with the perfect cats. All right, I'm gonna use the center cat that's kind of on the prowl. I think that one is so fun. And then I'll also pull out a couple of the little butterflies that we can make flying around it. So I'll ink up the cat, get a nice jet black image, and then I'll stamp him exactly where I want him to be on the card. So I think I'll place him up there. Give it some good pressure to make sure that it stamps really evenly. And then I'm just gonna use the sentiment that says you are perfect. And then we'll stamp that down right below it, kind of following the angle of that cat on a little bit of a slant. And I'm also gonna stamp down a couple of those little butterflies that we can use as well, using some VersaFine. All right, perfect. You guys know me, to seal in that ink, I'm gonna use a little bit of clear heat embossing powder, tap off the excess, and heat it until it's clear and shiny. All right, then I'll pull out the die that coordinates from the Perfect Cats coordinating die set. Make sure we line it up with an even white border all the way around the image. And then I'll use a little bit of mint tape to hold this in place and make sure that it doesn't shift while we run it through our die cutting machine. Now for this, I want to do a little bit of partial die cutting. I want his feet to not cut. So I'm gonna go in here with my top die cutting plate, and I'm going to place it up to the point as to where I want it to cut, placing it at a little bit of an angle, kind of following that sentiment there, and anything outside the plates won't cut, so his feet will stay intact. Then we can run this right through to cut it out. And once we lift it off, you can see that everything cut out up until his feet at the bottom here. All right, so to cut the rest of this out, you're gonna line it up on the angle that you want it, and then go in with a little X-Acto knife and just follow along on the ruler. And every time you get to a place where it meets the cat's foot, just stop what you've done. And so you're just gonna cut up until that point. Then we're gonna skip over the cat's leg and then cut right in between them. All right, then remove any of the excess, and you'll see that we're kind of cutting that space in between the legs and removing this top section. And then to finish it off, I'll start from the leg and meet all the way back up until the edge, until it all comes out. And that gives this beautiful, partially die cut effect where its legs are still intact to this bottom panel. I love how that turned out, and check out all that detail that the die cut created around the edge. All right, now I'm gonna go in with some of my Simon Hurley ink pads, and I'm just going to smoosh them down onto my craft sheet to create sort of a palette of color that we can lift from. So just starting off with a regular paintbrush and clear water, I'm just gonna go in all over the image and start painting it in with just the water. This is going to get the cardstock ready for our coloring and allowing the color to blend really well on the surface. If you just go in with straight color, it'll sink right into the cardstock, whereas this water is sort of preparing it to take the ink and have it blend around on the surface. Don't be afraid to mix your colors together. Here I'm mixing a little bit of Over the Moon and Cookie Dough to create a really nice, warm, rich shade of tan. Then I'll go in here and start painting that layer all over the cat. It's a really light, warm layer, but it's the perfect color for the cat to make it kind of yellowy and tan, but not too orange. Then to add a little bit of shading, I'm going in with some Gur, and I'm just going to bring this in some areas where I want some depth and dimension. So around his face, I'll also add some in right around these stripes, and where anything meets. So where his legs meet, there should be a little bit of a shadow there, so I'll add in a little bit of brown all over. And check out how great that looks all watercolored in. Using several different shades gives it lots of depth and dimension to the coloring. Now to create a background for this card, I'm gonna do a little bit of You guessed it, tone-on-tone stamping. I'm using this background stamp from a previous release called Splatter. This is kind of a must-have just to add texture to different backgrounds. So if you just need a little bit of texture, this is perfect for that. I'm gonna go in here with a mid-tone blue ink called Clear Skies, and I'm going to ink up this background stamp all over. Once you've got it good and inked, you can place your cardstock right down. And then I'll use my pressure tool to just go all the way around and make sure that the stamp transfers perfectly on the image. And check out that beautifully stamped result. That tone-on-tone stamping gives it a great texture, but still keeps it subtle enough that it can be in the background. All right, so to adhere this together, I'm adding it down to a top folding stark white A2 size card base, line it up at the top edge, and then drop it down, and it should line up with the rest of the card. Then I'll take the panel with the cat, pop it up on some foam tape, and adhere it down at the bottom of the card. Then last but not least, I'll add the little butterflies floating all around the card. So he's kind of looking at one over here, so I'll make one flying right there. Then I'll glue down a little red one. And lastly, I'll finish it off with this little orange butterfly. So they're kind of flying upwards like that. So here's a closer look at the finished card. I love that partial die cutting technique with the cat to make it so that you have a two-tone background and it gives it lots of interest. That splatter background adds tons of texture to the card, and finishing it off with those adorable little butterflies that the cat is chasing is so fun and adorable. I just love how this one turned out, and it's the perfect card for any cat lovers in your life. I think I'm gonna give this one to my best friend because she has a cat that looks exactly like this one. All right guys, so that finishes off today's release video. I hope you enjoyed all of the inspiration using my new fall collection with Ranger and Spellbinders. Like I said, everything that I used is available now, so I'll leave links down below where you can check it out and go shopping, and using those links helps support me, so I really do appreciate it. Now before I go, I also want to give a huge shout out to the whole Ranger team. They do such an amazing job behind the scenes, putting everything together, helping coordinate the release, finalizing all of the artwork, and everything that goes into the manufacturing process. I truly would not be able to do any of this without them. So if you guys are watching, a huge thank you to all of you at the Ranger team. They do such an amazing job. I also want to give another shout out to the Spellbinders team for putting together all these coordinated die sets and making sure that their timeline really aligned with the Ranger timeline, so we can get everything out to all of you guys on time. So again, a huge shout out to the Spellbinders team as well, and be sure to thank them in the comments below. Both of those teams do such an amazing job. Be sure to leave me a comment down below letting me know which card and products were your favorite in today's video. I always love chatting with you guys down there, and give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Now without further ado, I'll see you guys very soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye!